The recovery of the Joseph Smith papyri in 1967 revealed some startling new information about the papyri. First, it was discovered that a large gap, or lacuna, was present in the original illustration to facsimile 1. Critics contend that Joseph Smith inaccurately filled in this gap with inappropriate drawings. Instead of the head of a bald priest, they contend a figure at the end of the lion couch should have had the head of a jackal. And instead of a figure with 2 arms raised up in the air, critics contend there should be a second bird hovering above the lion couch.
When we examine this facsimile, first of all, we find that there really isn't another one like it. It seems to be unique. And evidence, especially some of the most recent evidence, suggests that it really is fingertips rather than a wingtip that critics claim was another hawk, and it actually is a second arm by Abraham that's raised in attitude of prayer. But as far as the bald head of the priest, the critics claim, well, okay, this priest would have been a symbol of Anubis, Egyptian god, and it would have had the head of a jackal. Well, we know that in the Ptolemaic period that the priests many times shaved their heads, and that they were bald, and they wore many times jackal masks, but they were still bald priests, in performing the rituals. So Joseph Smith got it right as far as the bald priest. Joseph Smith got it right as far as the fingers instead of wingtips.
Some of the interesting things about facsimile 1 is how different it is from anything else. I'm not aware of any where they have 2 hands up. Some people will argue that these are reconstructions, that it shouldn't really be 2 hands. Recently, a good Egyptologist has looked at it and said, and looked at all the parallels he can find and said, no, these are 2 hands. Some people have argued they're wings or something like that. He's agreed with us. These are 2 hands. They're up like this. That's different. That denotes some kind of struggle or some kind of movement going on.
We have several examples of inscriptions on walls or illustrations on walls of temples that show an Egyptian priest with a jackal-headed mask over his head, and it's done such that it's kind of like an X-ray view where they've shown it so that you can see the priest's head inside with this jackal-headed mask over the top of it. And there are also archaeologists have discovered some of those actual masks.
As Professor John Gee of Brigham Young University wrote in an important scholarly study that, among other things, showed evidence for Egyptian priests wearing Anubis masks, the priest acts in the place of God. This may be done in various ways, such as placing a mask of the god on his head, or by simply declaring himself to be a god. However the restoration is made, the individual shown in facsimile 1 figure 3 is a priest, and the entire question of which head should be on the figure is moot so far as identifying the figure is concerned. The entire debate has been a waste of ink. The question is not whether Joseph Smith's reconstruction of the standing figure in his lion couch vignette is accurate, but rather whether the figure is identified correctly as a priest. It is. It is also argued that the priest should not be holding a knife in his hands as depicted in facsimile 1. Many LDS scholars believe that the scroll was damaged after Joseph translated the vignette, and some evidence seems to support this view. One early Latter-day Saint who saw the papyri in 1841, for instance, described them as containing the scene of an altar with a man bound and laid thereon, and a priest with a knife in his hand standing at the foot, with a dove over the person bound on the altar, with several idol gods standing around it. Similarly, Reverend Henry Caswall, who visited Nauvoo in April 1842, had a chance to see some of the Egyptian papyri. Caswall, who was hostile to the saints, described facsimile 1 as having a man standing by him with a drawn knife. The knife on the original papyrus was not drawn in by Joseph Smith. A photograph of the Joseph Smith Papyrus 1 shows there is no knife that has been drawn. In other words, facsimile 1 correctly reflects what the Joseph Smith Papyrus figure 1 originally contained. Critics also claim that the figure on the lion couch should not have both hands raised in the air, and instead of arms a bird should be there. However, this is not a valid argument, because bird wings are generally drawn enclosed with a solid line around them, while hands are a series of lines to represent the fingers. In the very same facsimile, the illustrator draws the bird, which represents an angel of the Lord with rounded wings. Surely he would have drawn another bird in the same fashion. An interesting point is the hieroglyph for praise or supplicate, in the figure of a man in the same position that Abraham is in on the lion couch. This is exactly what Abraham was doing in Abraham 1:15 when he said, "I lifted up my voice unto the Lord my God, and the Lord hearkened and heard."
According to Joseph Smith, Abraham laying on the couch, he had his arms upraised in an attitude of prayer. And there's one hawk floating above him, and then the priest is above him with a knife about to sacrifice him. Well, the priest is drawn bald, and according to most Egyptologists that have looked at this, or at least originally, they say that Joseph Smith got it wrong. That the priest wouldn't have been holding a knife, that he would have been in an attitude of trying to resurrect Osiris, who was actually laying on the lion couch, and that there would have been two hawks above him. And so that's their claim, is Joseph Smith got it wrong. But there is some evidence that actually Joseph Smith got it right.
If we look at the original papyrus among the Joseph Smith papyri, that portion of the papyrus is missing. What almost certainly that standing figure had the head of a jackal. All other illustrations similar to that have a jackal, and the actual, the skin coloring on that standing figure, dark skin coloring, is that of a jackal, of the jackal god Anubis. That does not eliminate the possibility that it is still a priest. One of them is it's a large pottery jug shaped like a jackal's head, painted black and everything, with two little eye holes to look out of. It must have been incredibly heavy to carry that thing around. And in the illustration, there's one priest behind him, kind of holding him and guiding him. It's like, with this tunnel vision, he couldn't see what he was doing. So yes, it represents the god Anubis, but priests would, in their rituals, act as if they were the gods, and even put on masks and so on to act out those parts. And so that does not invalidate Joseph Smith's interpretation.
Yes, there were some witnesses that talk about seeing the facsimiles, the vignettes that the facsimiles were created from, and they describe them in details pretty much like we have them now, even with the restored markings that are on the papyri that we have, or the Mount of Papyri. There's also some evidence that they weren't complete, and in fact, what they call a lacuna, which is basically a tear that shows up through, especially through one of the vignettes, that goes to the lower layers. So it's obviously a tear that had appeared while the scroll was rolled up, because it tapers on, gets thinner and thinner and narrower. That could have happened when Joseph Smith, after Joseph Smith got the papyri. It's possible that it happened before Joseph Smith got the papyrus. So yeah, we don't know for sure.